Everyone's telling you AI is going to take your job, it's going to destroy the economy, it's going to change everything, and it's time to panic. And they're not exactly wrong, but they are missing the most important thing. I've been deep in AI tools since day one, but 9 weeks ago, I had to completely change my view on what's coming. And what I've seen means that the next decade could be the most exciting one in human history, but not for the reasons most people are talking about. From the discourse online, it seems like most people have no idea and are totally unprepared and will not be able to benefit from the massive opportunities coming our way. So in this conversation, let's unpack what's actually happening, past the hype, past the fear, past the doom and gloom. In this episode, we'll get into how both AI skeptics and AI maximalists are missing the big picture because neither of them can admit how uncertain the future really is. Why AI might take all of our jobs, but most of those jobs are things humans shouldn't be doing in the first place. And once you see this, you can't unsee it. Also, a 19th century paradox about steam engines and coal that might explain why most people's expectations about how AI will affect the economy are completely wrong. I'll also share with you the moment I saw AI go from impressive parlor trick to actually useful, and what that means. And to explain how AI will lead to a creativity explosion that most people are underestimating, I'll share with you one of the most wholesome stories to come out recently about a man and his dog who almost died of cancer. All right, enough with the teasers, let's get straight into the conversation.
I think the best place to start with this is that many people are probably really anxious what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. This huge thing, AI, that's going to take everybody's jobs and make everybody redundant. What this has meant is that content creators have jumped all over this bandwagon and forced this down your throats in every YouTube video and article. That's probably left a lot of people really anxious and worried and not sure what to do to position themselves for this AI trend.
Yeah.
But you have a different view on this. You're one of the most optimistic people I know about this. And I'd really love to just dig into why you think this is not all doom and gloom and why actually there's many positive things to take out of this wave of AI.
Look, I think that AI is going to be incredibly disruptive. It's already pretty disruptive, and I think it's going to be hugely more disruptive in the coming years. And I think that most people are missing most of what's really going on because of the nature of the information landscape we're in. And we talked about this in the Doomer Mindset podcast, right? That there's this problem of if you're just paying attention to things that show up in algorithmic feeds, which is basically everything nowadays, then you're always getting the stuff that gets the most attention because of the negativity bias, the stuff that makes you afraid, that makes you angry, that makes you outraged and so on will always rise to the top. So the whole discussion, what the average person thinks about AI, I think, has very recently gone from, oh, this is nothing, it's just a bubble, the bubble's going to burst like the dot-com bubble did and then it's over, to, oh my God, this is going to end everything, everybody's going to lose their job, the economy is going to zero, everybody's going to be homeless and destitute, it's over. Something like that, right? And why is that? Well, that's because this has become the more interesting narrative now. I think the truth is, what's happening is extraordinary, and the next years are going to be incredibly interesting. It is going to be massively disruptive, and I think people massively underestimate how good this is going to be. What we're seeing here is exemplary technological progress, right? It's really, this is going to improve lives so much, and I think most people are just missing that.
So let's dig into this a bit deeper then. How do you see that this will be a positive influence on our lives?
The thing that happened a few months ago is that these AI tools went from being really advanced autocomplete to being agentic, to actually getting stuff done. And that's a really key distinction. Like the reason that I switched my mindset on this and I switched my views about what's going to happen in the next years is not because of anything I consumed, because I consume very little content really. It's really about my own use of these tools, because I've been using these tools ever since they've been around. And for a long time, the experience was that it was like a very impressive parlor trick. If you kind of have a conversation with ChatGPT, you're like, wow, this thing is so smart. This thing can answer all my questions. And as long as you don't dig deeper And as long as you don't want it to actually do something for you, the illusion is maintained. But as soon as you actually dig in, as soon as you, and I think especially ChatGPT was very tricky there because it's such an ass kiss, right? It always tells you, oh, you're so brilliant, you're so right, you're the best, right? It's constantly making you feel good about yourself, which makes it less likely that you go, hold on, you seem to have contradicted yourself, or hold on, this doesn't really make sense. Because why would you question the person that's constantly telling you you're the best, right? So, but as soon as you do that, as soon as you push back, or as soon as you go, no, I actually want you to do something useful for me, it just would fall apart. And I think that was the experience of many people who used it more in any way that's more than just a casual conversation. You realize it's actually not intelligent at all. It's actually really frustratingly dumb. It's like impressive as long as you don't look close enough. So write an article on this topic, and it cranks out this article really quickly and go, wow, that's amazing. Until you start reading it and you go, this is a terrible article. This is an absolutely terrible article. And it's like, if you have it compose an article on a topic that you know nothing about, you're like, yeah, I mean, it's not very well written. It's like full of cliches and stuff, but I guess it's fine. If you have it do it on a topic that you actually know something about, you're like, oh my God, what the hell is this? It's so bad, right? So you realize that there's really nothing there, basically. And which isn't to take away, like, it is impressive, right? It's a very impressive trick. But I think everybody who used these tools in a way where you're really trying to push them to do something useful for you, just very quickly realizes like, oh, it really is a next word guesser. It's really good at strings of words that somehow seem correct, but there's no substance to it. And the more you try to get use out of it, the more frustrating it is. And this has changed a lot because these agentic tools have come along. And the biggest difference here, really, what happened is that they got better and better at writing code. And if you have a really good next word guesser on code, you can turn that into something useful much more than if you have a next word guesser on language. Just spoken language or written language. But so for the coding, I think it crossed the threshold. It crossed the threshold a few months ago where it went from, it writes code that's basically not useful at all, to, oh, I can actually use this. And then things like Claude Code came along and people started using it in a terminal, which basically just means like, look, you're giving this tool access to other tools. You can give it access to your files. You can give it access to your desktop. You can give it access to open source tools that it can download from the internet and so on. And what then happens is that people start building harnesses and systems. Because if you have this next word guesser that writes code decently well, you can start doing interesting things with it that make it more and more effective over time. And this has led to like kind of an explosion all of a sudden. Because if you tell the AI, hey, write me an entire app from start to finish, it's going to make a huge mess of it. But if you have a clever system where you maybe start with a template and then you have one AI agent that writes a plan and then another AI agent maybe using a different AI model that's better at coding, breaks down the plan into little chunks, then you have little AI agents that are coding each individual chunk and another AI agent that's checking that they're not making any mistakes and so on. You can get to the point where you can have really impressive levels of output. Even though it's not great at doing a whole project or doing a big task, you can manage the system in such a way that you're kind of managing around the weaknesses of the tool. And people have been starting to do this and starting to share their various systems for how to do this. And this creates like an explosion, right? An explosion in advancement where it keeps getting better, even if the underlying model doesn't get better. And in addition to that, the underlying model keeps getting better. And this is going to accelerate like crazy. But as a very brief summary, what happened is we went from a tool that's very advanced autocomplete, but not useful, to a tool that, when used right, can actually do effective, useful work. And mostly this is expressed in it writes actually usable and actually shippable code. Now, I know that from an expert developer's perspective, the code is not great. But from the user's perspective, what matters is, can I use this app, right? And we're there. It's never going to be worse than it is right now, you know? So right now, you can make jankily coded, not imperfect apps. Pretty soon, you're going to be able to create apps and websites and web tools and so on that are well coded, you know, that basically pass the sniff test of a good developer.
Just for people who aren't technically minded or perhaps haven't dug into AI into any great detail yet, when you say agentic, What do you mean in clear terms there?
So it basically means that you can have these tools do actual work. Now, we could get into what exactly that means or how it works, but the meaningful difference is that before you would ask, hey, I have a whole bunch of data and I want to get some insight out of it. And it would tell you, here's what to do. Go into your Excel, enter this formula into this cell, then do this, then create this pivot table, right? Whereas now it just does it, right? You give it the data, you say, I want to know, whatever, it's just a huge database table of visitors to my website. And I was like, I want to know which pages do people visit before they buy something. And it just goes, here's the answer, right? Because it does all the formulaic stuff. It does the calculation. It actually does the work for you and gives you the result. And the amount of this kind of work that these tools can do has expanded massively. Because so Excel was a while ago, but now you can literally tell a thing, look, I want you to design a web app, and then I want you to test that web app and improve it based on the test results. And you can have a whole loop, and you can have this thing running all day and all night long, just with multiple agents. One of them is building, another one is testing and giving feedback and so on. And you could come back to something that it has literally thousands of development hours in it. And it's probably going to be a huge mess, right? But it is possible to get these things to ship actually workable things and to do the work for you instead of just telling you how to do the work yourself.
So is it true to say that agents have their own models and their own kind of code backing them up? Or what are they technically speaking, agents?
You can have an agent that is essentially a system that says, I use this API key to call ChatGPT or Claude Code or Gemini or some other model. And I run these kinds of commands within, you basically create rules of what is this agent allowed to do, what is it not allowed to do, and what tools does it call, how does it call these tools, and so on. But it's really just software. The key thing is it actually does work. And it's getting more and more to the point where it can emulate the work a human does, even literally. So recently, Anthropic released a feature where Claude can essentially use your computer, like literally use the visual user interface of your computer. It can click through browser tabs. It can click on buttons. It can fill forms. It can do whatever a person can do on a computer. You can have it do that, right? So these things are just getting closer and closer to being able to do anything that a human could do and actually follow it through to completion.
I think that's a great kind of high level into where AI is at right now. But the real question is, how is this going to make our lives better? Why is this something to be positive about when potentially we might lose our jobs? Yes. Or we're worried about our job security and so forth?
Let's talk about the jobs thing first, because obviously from what I've just described, if these systems get better and better at doing the work that a human does, then doesn't that mean we're all going to lose our jobs? And on the one hand, yes, lots and lots of jobs are going to disappear, and many of them are going to disappear soon. And I think there's two things we have to realize here. First, there's a lot of uncertainty in this, where one thing we have to take into account is Jevon's paradox, which comes from, the observation is from the 19th century, from noticing that more efficient steam engines did not reduce the demand for coal, but increased it. So if you think about it, right, a more efficient steam engine needs less coal to produce the same amount of energy. And logically, you would think, well, we need less coal then, right? But the more efficient steam engines got, the higher the demand for coal became, because the more efficient and cheaper and easier to use a steam engine is, the more people want to use it in more different contexts. And this has generally always been true with advancements. And so this could be true again, that what we're seeing is, for example, creating software is becoming much cheaper, much easier to do. And as a result, we might see an incredible explosion in demand for software. We might see 1,000x the demand for software, for niche software applications, than what we've had so far. That's possible, and that would preserve jobs and create more jobs. But I also want to say, we don't know whether Jevon's paradox applies here or not. It has applied to basically all technological advancement so far, but it could be that this time is different. But I think it's useful to at least have the frame that if you're saying this technological advancement is going to cost everyone's jobs and destroy the economy, what you are saying is this time is different from every single time before when there's been technological advancement. What I'm saying is that's possible, but how does that change your feeling about the likelihood? So what we might see is just another one of these. We also need to be clear that when this happens, still a lot of jobs disappear and they get replaced with different jobs. That can be very unpleasant for a lot of people. You might have spent your whole life training for a job that doesn't exist anymore in 2 years. That sucks. So none of this is to say like it's going to be easy and fun. The other thing that we have to see, and I think this is what we're really not ready for, is that it's going to replace jobs. And the jobs it's going to replace are things that humans shouldn't be doing in the first place. Which again, this has been true of all technological advancement. You know, it's like if you see someone now working a field with a hoe manually, you don't think, oh, that's good, this guy has a job. You know, you think, why is a person doing this? A person shouldn't be doing this. The advancement of even just having animal labor do that kind of work instead, that's a good advancement. And someone who was hacking away at the field before lost their job. Great, right? Or if you think of assembly line work, assembly line factory work, at some point it was someone's job all day long to like screw a bottle cap onto a bottle. And then the next bottle comes down the assembly line, you screw on the next. Like, do you think a human being, that's what we should do? You know, think about human potential, right? A whole human being who takes 2 decades more or less to grow to maturity, right? And then you're going like this all day, screwing on bottle caps. Is that what we should do with a human being? No, clearly not, right? So when people lose their assembly line jobs, it sucks for those people generally, but also overall for everyone, we're better off. And it's basically, it's always like looking back a few decades later, you go like, well, thank God we're not doing that anymore. And the truth is, a lot of the work that people do is like that. And look, we're not ready for it because we come from a paradigm that has deeply ingrained in us the idea that in order to be valuable as a human being, you have to produce economic output. And to produce economic output, you turn yourself into some kind of a machine, right? Most of us have trained ourselves to turn ourselves into some kind of a machine in order to essentially get paid. I want to give you a relatively simple example and then a radical example of what I'm talking about. Like a simple example is, again, if you think of something like a truck driver. Truck drivers, that's millions of jobs. And those are going to get replaced with autonomous vehicles. Don't know how soon. This might actually take longer than people expected. But eventually you will not have a human sitting behind the wheel of a truck for 10 hours at a time, doing almost nothing, you know, going down a mostly straight road, which again, like, is a hugely unhealthy job. And why would you have a human being do that? It doesn't seem like a humane thing to do. But of course, a lot of people are making a living as truck drivers and feeding their family, and that's important. A few decades later, we'll look back and go, well, thank God nobody's doing this anymore. This was not a good thing to do to humans. A less obvious example of this, let me go straight to the jugular here. Most of what content creators are doing now is stuff that shouldn't be done by a human being. And I'm going for content creators because it's like, oh, but isn't that a creative pursuit? Is it? How many content creators are doing content as a creative pursuit? And how many of us are basically just machines? We are just sitting there watching what's happening on the algorithm and going, oh, okay, well, in order to keep getting the views and keep getting, hopefully, you know, sponsorship money or whatever, I'm going to have to look at, and you're basically running an algorithm in your brain. I'm going to look at what's trending on TikTok right now, and then I'm going to use the trending sounds and the trending templates, and I'm going to do the silly dance so that I can get paid. This is dehumanizing. What are you doing? And look, if you talk to content creators, a lot of content creators, like social media creators and stuff, they're not living a good life. It's incredibly stressful. It's a horrible job. If this was a job, it's a horrible job. If it was a job, it would be illegal in most of Europe to treat someone like that. These working conditions and working hours and so on. And it's like a horrible, dehumanizing thing to do. It's like, oh, I have to keep up with the algorithm all the time. I have to fucking, you know, do whatever the latest humiliating thing is. Or in an even worse case, I have to distort my own worldview. This happens to a lot of content creators, right? You become some weirdo because, you know, whatever, let's say I make some content that appeals to people in the manosphere or something, and then that gets views, and then I'm motivated to make more content like that. Before you know it, I'm spewing the most inane nonsense, and I'm being one of these angry manosphere dudes, who's angry at women and angry at the liberals and angry at everyone. Why? Because shouting angrily in a microphone gets me paid. And it doesn't even get me paid well for most people. So what I'm distorting my own mind. I'm turning myself into this goblin for some ad money. That's a really gross thing to do to a human being. And then you can say, well, but people are doing it to themselves. Yeah, but is that what you wanted? Is that who you wanted to become? And so replacing all the influencers and all the content creators and so on with AI, which is happening, by the way, this is totally happening. It's also a step in the right direction. It's going to be hugely disruptive, but a few decades, you'll look back and go, thank God humans are not doing that to themselves anymore. It's pathetic and sad that it was ever a thing, So yes, we're going to lose our jobs, and we're going to lose lots of jobs that really people shouldn't be doing.
Funny you mentioned the manosphere. Did you watch that documentary from Louis Theroux recently about that?
I saw that he did something, but I haven't seen it.
But one of the funniest things in that documentary is basically exactly what you said, because on the one hand, these content creators are producing this inflammatory content to try and get a response and try and gain an audience. And on the other hand, they're actually living a life that isn't quite in alignment. Like one guy was openly honest and said, well, the reason I produce such crazy content is because that's how I got successful. That's how I get views. Yeah. And then when the cameras are off, he's different.
Of course, yeah. Dude, this is true for so many people. And there's also something that causes a lot of suffering among those people. The worst thing about it is that the distribution is such that it's usually only like the top 1 or 2% of people in any niche are making any kind of decent money. And so you have like thousands, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of people who are torturing themselves, making stuff that feels gross, right? And again, like distorting their own worldview and stuff in a desperate attempt to climb up the hill to get enough views to make a decent living. And it's just sad.
Yeah, and it's even worse because it's like the click distribution on Google search results, right? The top result gets like 90% of the clicks, and then it's second and third.
The earnings, like if you look at the earnings distributions of like whatever YouTube channels or social media influencers, it's always this hockey stick, right? It's just crazy. I'm just picking content creators as an example because we can fool ourselves into thinking, oh, but this is creative work. This is, isn't this the core of human work? No, it's not the core of human work. What you're doing to yourself is this weird, again, like I want to bring attention to how much we are conditioned to turn ourselves into a machine. Like you turn yourself into a machine that makes the right kind of hook, the right kind of spectacle, adds it to the right kind of background music in order to do the thing to please the algorithm. So you've become an algorithm puppet. Look, the same way it doesn't make sense to put a human, if you think about the system, right? You grow a human being from zero to a fully grown adult in order to have them twist bottle caps onto bottles. That's crazy. That is a crazy way to get bottle caps onto a bottle. And similarly, if you have an algorithm that determines what slop is fed into people's eyeballs to keep them sticking around for ads, having a fully grown human as a component in that system where the human tries to figure out what does the algorithm need and then creates it is equally crazy. Let's not do that. And look, where all this is headed is I'm saying like, yes, people are going to lose their jobs massively. There's going to be a lot of pressure. You can think of it like on the system that we're in, there's going to be a lot of pressure for humans to find non-machine-like things to do. And I think also there's going to be so much abundance that it's going to be confusing about how to deal with all this, right? Because look, there is real productivity here. This is going to create real abundance. And there's going to be a lot of pressure for people to not do this thing of how do I become a more effective machine to wring some money out of the system. And this is also where I want to be very clear. I have no idea what this is going to look like. I don't know what this future looks like. And from what I can see, it's going to be really disruptive because the system we live in is not ready for this. But it is going to be a problem of abundance.
So there's a few things I want to dig into here. But firstly, because you mentioned content creation and you've basically gone down that whole road, The obvious question is, well, you are a content creator, so how are you thinking about this over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, look, I've never been a good content creator in that sense because I've always refused to do this thing, or I've always resisted it as much as possible. Look, I had my most, I'm most successful on TikTok, believe it or not, right? It's on TikTok, I have millions upon millions of views, and I abandoned it in part because I was getting all these views, but it wasn't helping me achieve my goals, which are meaning-based goals. We can talk about that in a moment. But also because I just realized that I basically cracked the code on how to go viral, and I didn't want to do that because it's exactly what I talked about before. I've never made content for the sake of making content, for the sake of participating in the algorithm game and getting ads and sponsorship money and stuff like that. For me, it's always meaning first. So I see myself as a teacher, and I'm trying to teach people. I'm trying to convey ideas and examples and information to people in such a way that it improves their lives. That is what matters. And content is one of the media I use to try and do that. It's possible that it become pointless for me to make online content, such as what we're recording right now. It's possible because it's possible that in the not too distant future, it doesn't make any sense to watch a video that a human made, if, especially like educational or whatever, because you just tell your system, hey, give me a Shane style video on this topic, and it makes a better one than I could make. So it's possible that that goes away. And I think it's also possible that people will just come back to what is real, so that you might still watch, and you might be more interested in watching, let's say, a live stream of me teaching or talking or coaching, even though, of course, that's not as polished and as perfect. Like the algorithm, the AI will be able to deliver you the perfect thing that just keeps you engaged and stimulated and, right, that tickles your brain in just the right way. And the algorithm will be able to do that much, much better than I can. And this is already happening, by the way. So algorithm-based content is already starting to overtake human-created content. Or so I should say AI-generated content is already starting to win. If what you want is that stimulation, if what you want is to doom scroll, I think doom scrolling will be devoid of human-generated content pretty soon. But there might still be other reasons why you want to watch a video. But for pure entertainment, for pure stimulation and distraction, I think that's going away. And one of the alternatives that's emerging is the wisdom community. This is something that Tom Morgan has pioneered, where you have a community of people limited to 150, and you have people interacting with each other in that closed community, and everybody's a real human there, right? There's no AI allowed. And I think as the internet gets flooded with AI-generated content, people might retreat into these islands of, here's where I go to interact with actual humans. And I'm also very bullish about this when the doom scrolling game gets solved. And we're pretty close to that, right? It's just solved, where the algorithm is so good at getting you hooked and so good at delivering you the exact right slot machine that keeps you going. It becomes a little bit like, do you choose to do heroin? Because from what I understand, heroin is really good. It's really good. And do you want to do that to yourself? And I think, the future of like TikTok is basically like, it's digital heroin. It's so good. It's so good. It's just gonna get you in that hole for hours, for as long as you want, right? And it becomes much more of a question of, do I want to do that with myself? And some people, I want to be very clear about this. Some people are going to plumb new depths of suffering, which has already happened with smartphones, right? People cause so much misery for themselves with how they use smartphones. And with AI, it's going to get worse. People are going to discover whole new levels of suffering that we don't know about yet. This is going to happen. You basically can't stop people from doing that. And you can't stop the companies from creating that. Like as long as it's legal to create and distribute heroin, someone's going to do it, right? So this is going to happen, and it becomes more of a choice of, well, what do you want to do with your time? And I think we're already seeing people, there's like this longing for more of a connection with community, more of a connection with nature, more of a connection with yourself. And longer term, I'm very, very bullish on lots of stuff that's just not online. Things like circles, like men's circles, women's circles, yoga, hiking, run clubs. Also lots of just coaching and therapy and things like that. Stuff that's happens between humans in real life, face to face. There's going to be like a re-emergence of that. I think that's going to be a growing trend among the people who choose not to do the heroin version of social media.
Sounds like the The theme underlining your thesis is it's going to be a bit of a race back to humanity. We'll be spending time doing what we should be doing as humans.
Yeah.
But let's delve into what you think that is. What kind of things will we be spending more time on?
I think where this is going is, you know, the parable of the fisherman. I'm sure you've heard, you know, a successful businessman goes on a vacation and to some little island, you know, little village, and there's a fisherman there, and he goes out, you know, the fisherman takes him out to go fishing with him, and they sit out on the boat and they have conversations and they're doing their fishing, and it's so relaxing, right? It's so nice. And the businessman asks the fisherman about, you know, what you do and so on. And it turns out the fisherman is like, basically he goes out and catches fish every day and he feeds his family with those fish, and that's basically it, right? He has no wealth to speak of. And the businessman goes, oh, you know, you could totally turn this into a business. If you hire someone and you sell some of the fish, and then you can increase your productivity and get more boats and more nets and so on and so forth, you can basically build wealth instead of just feeding yourself and your family fish. And the fisherman goes, well, okay, that sounds like a lot of work. The businessman goes, yeah, you've got to work hard for many years to build a business, right? And the fisherman goes, well, why would I do that? It sounds unpleasant. And the businessman goes, well, you know, if you do it really well, you eventually will be so well off that you can take a vacation on a beautiful exotic island and spend all day fishing. And the fisherman goes, well, that's what I'm already doing, right? I think, look, I think that's what a world of abundance looks like. Here's the crazy thing. If I talk about a world of abundance, if I talk about a world where there's more of everything than you could possibly need, so there's just no need for every human being to go spend 8 hours a day being productive in order to take care of everyone's basic needs, and forget basic needs, in order to take care of everyone's amazing lifestyle. Everybody can have an amazing life without people having to grind away. That's what an abundant future looks like. And that sounds like science fiction until you realize that it's mostly already here. Our living standards are crazy compared to every single generation before us. Our living standards are insanely high. Our level of wealth and freedom is insanely high. And yes, I'm also talking to the person who struggles to pay rent for their little apartment in a city somewhere. I'm not saying everybody's rich in the sense of I can buy a Lamborghini. Everybody's rich in the sense of like the opportunities you have and the things you have, the access you have to leisure and amenities and entertainment and so on and so forth is incredible compared to everyone who came before you. And I'm very aware that the wealth is unequally distributed, but that also is trending in the right direction. One of the things that's already happening is a lot of people have jobs that are, first of all, bullshit jobs. And a lot of people are jobs where technically they're supposed to work 8 hours a day, but they're not working 8 hours a day. They're working maybe 2 hours a day. How much actually useful, productive work are most people doing? Which basically shows you that we're already in a situation where we can, without everyone's 8 hours a day input, take care of everyone's needs and create all this stuff and create all these circumstances. There's going to be more and more of that, where you just go, well, if you don't want to work, you don't have to work. And we have to find a system for how to do that, which we don't have yet, or we don't have a good system for that yet. But the other thing is, and like this is also where specifically the AI thing matters, is that what these tools enable is they enable creativity. And right now, it's still complicated. Let's put it this way. So I've seen this. One of the things I've been doing is I've been working on Quit by Healing, which has been a side project for a few years. It's been a passion project. And so Quit by Healing is a brand and a channel where I talk to men who struggle with porn addiction, which is a very common problem. And I make content and I have a course and so on. I basically try to do something useful for men who struggle with this problem. And it's always been a side project because it doesn't make that much money. We've even talked about it before, we've looked at the market and we've looked at, is it worth building an app here? Or is it worth trying to scale this? And we're like, I'm not sure. And why is that? Because before you looked at it and you went, well, if we want to make a mobile app that's really good and that helps these men in some way, it's probably going to cost like 200 grand or 300 grand or something like that to develop that. It's going to take many months. And in addition, like you have to get someone on board, right? You have to get like a developer on board, maybe a designer on board. You have to pay them. That's where all the cost comes from, or most of the cost comes from. But also you're getting some people that like quit their jobs to come join you. And there's also a real risk there, not only that you might burn through a whole bunch of cash and it goes nowhere, but also like you're risking other people's careers, right? You're putting other people at risk. So it's a huge obstacle to overcome. And this is why you're always incentivized to only like take safe bets and so on. And now we're getting to a point where it's just like, well, I could sit down with a couple of AI agents and have them create lots of stuff that before was just not possible or is not worth it for something like Quit My Healing. And even app development is something I'm getting into because I think it's still a bit difficult now, but 6 months from now, it's probably going to be trivial. And I can say, look, there's a little niche app I would like to make for this little market. It might never make a huge amount of money, but if I can create that app in a week for a few $100s or something like that, and I can create the website for it, the marketing material for it, and so on and so forth, then even if it only makes a few $1,000s, it's first of all already profitable, and secondly, it's worth it because again, meaning if I could get an app into the hands of even just 1,000 guys and it changes their lives in a little bit, it makes their lives a little bit better, and I don't lose money on it, that's already worth doing. That's already happening. Right now, we have an unlock where millions upon millions of ideas that before now were not worth pursuing because costs too much, takes too much time, too much risk, are now all of a sudden worth doing. So right away, and that creates wealth, by the way, that creates wealth. And this is going to go way further. And I want to highlight, like there's been a story that went viral this week or last week about this guy the story of Paul Cunningham and his dog Rosie. His dog got cancer and they basically told him, look, there's nothing you can do. And he did his own research and he did using AI assistants, but he did a lot of work here. But basically doing his own research, he figured out how to like sequence the DNA of the tumor and then create an mRNA vaccine. And he administered the vaccine and the dog's cancer went into remission. And that's the short story. There's also another guy called Sid something. His last name is very hard to pronounce, but I'll find all of these people and put them in the video and in the description, who is doing a similar thing on his own cancer. Where basically the medical system gave up on him, his very aggressive bone cancer. And he was like, I'm going to do it myself. And I think he called it, I went founder mode on my own cancer or something like that, right? You treat it like one of these projects and you do all the research, you create the tools, you make the connections, you go entrepreneur mode on how do I solve this problem? People are going to do that en masse. This is one of the things that makes me hyper bullish about what's happening. In the podcast about the doomer mindset, we talked about how it's a trap to worry about everything in the world and feel responsible, like vaguely responsible for everything in the world. Because it makes much more sense to pick one battle. There's one thing you care about and you go, this is what I'm going to be about, right? And maybe you go, okay, it's climate change. Climate change is my thing. And if climate change is my thing, I'm not going to worry about poverty in Africa or malaria nets or cancer or a million other things. My thing is climate change, right? You pick one battle and you go all in on that. And the thing is, loads of people are already doing this. With all of what I'm saying, by the way, a great example of this is like, what about AI safety? Yeah, AI safety is a real concern. It's not my battle. There's loads of people, loads of super smart people are on that, okay? Other people are on that. And what we're going to see is the distribution of power here, meaning that the individual, the capability of the individual is going to rise and rise and rise. Yeah. And things like that, like someone says, I am going to take on this specific rare disease where big pharma does nothing about it because there's not enough money in treating this. I'm going to take this on. And all of a sudden, I have the power of a massive research team on my side in the form of AI agents, right? All of a sudden, way more stuff is possible for one person who cares to do. And this is going to change the world in ways that I don't think anyone can imagine. Like I've said many times, right now, this is still complicated. If you look at my setup that I use with AI stuff, it is complicated. Half the day, I'm looking at error messages in a command line interface terminal. Most people don't want to do that. I'm fully aware of that. It's only going to get less complicated and more powerful from here. This is exactly the same thing that happened with, early computers here where you were typing away at a command line interface And eventually you're just swiping and tapping on icons on an interface that everybody can use and understand. This is going to happen with these tools. So right now it requires, you really have to get into the weeds of it, and you have to like manually pipe together these different tools, and you have to have some idea of what you're doing. But over time, it's going to get more and more and more powerful. And it's going to get easier and easier to do things that you care about without having to know how to do them. I also want to link to an article which is called Rick Rubin is the Future of Work. It's a great article that explains about how more and more work isn't about knowing how to do something. It's about choosing and being picky about what to do. And the reason how this connects to Rick Rubin is he's a very successful music producer who famously doesn't play any instrument, doesn't sing, doesn't read music. He doesn't know how to make music. He knows what music should sound like for it to be really good. Yeah. And this is going to become more and more common, where you just go, look, I don't know how to do any of this. I don't know how to develop an app, but I know what app I think the world needs. Right now it's software and apps, and this is just going to expand and expand and expand, where people who care about something will be able to make stuff happen about that in ways that are unimaginable right now. This is going to change the world.
So just following on from this example, how does this person say they've created something in a world of AI-driven content that satisfies the algorithm? How do you garner attention, and how do you stand out when anybody can just replicate whatever you're building at the click of a button? Like, where do you get your unique value? Where do you get your edge from?
I think this is a problem that's already existed with open source software since the inception of open source software, right? Anyone can just fork and just copy your software and put their own label on it. And what stops them from doing that? And I think mostly the answer is it's just it's always better to coordinate than to try and steal. So the game theoretically, the players in the game who are playing it in good faith in this example, who are saying, well, instead of trying to steal other people's open source stuff and pass it off as my own, I'm going to contribute to the ecosystem. And as a contributor to the ecosystem, I actually have more to gain than as an opportunist in the ecosystem. And I think that's going to continue to be true. And I think also, like, look, I don't know what the answer is in terms of, what about if everything's just flooded with slop, how do you get the word out about your new thing? I don't know, but part of it might be, I think there will have to be some way for people who want actual human-to-human recommendation to still get that. And I don't know what that looks like. But another thing is also that a lot of this, I think what's happening is also there's an emergence of a second internet. So we've built the first internet, which is for humans, and we're now building a second internet, which is for agents. So a lot of it is also not going to be that I'm clicking around on the web trying to find a tool or an app or something that's good for me. It's that my agent is running around interacting with other agents. And if someone else has created a thing that is in line with my goals or in line with what I'm trying to build, my agent will go, hey, here's a thing. For certain things, the human is not going to be in the loop. So I give my agent a task and I say, I want you to create this thing. And I give my agent a budget. And my agent might then go and spend money on your product, on your service, in order to more efficiently deliver to me the thing that I want. I don't even know it. I don't even know that I'm your customer. And I think that economy, the agent-to-agent economy, is going to be massive. It could also, like the personalization of it is going to be really interesting. Because right now, we're nowhere near this, because one of the big problems with these tools is a lack of persistent memory, really. But this thing gets solved as well over time, and you will essentially have probably some kind of an agent that understands your goals and what you want to do and who you are and so on. And that agent might just proactively say, hey, here's a thing that might be helpful for you. And then probably there's also going to be a whole thing, there's going to be an industry about how to optimize your thing so that it gets discovered by agents and so on, which again, look at how many people's jobs is that going to be? I don't know. I don't know, right? All of this is speculative, but I think that's the direction the development is pointing in. I think a lot of people are talking about the economic implications and things like that. For me, the interesting thing is always about humans, right? It's how do humans thrive? How does, in this world, as it's changing so rapidly, how do you as a human being have a good time in all this? What's clear to me is that we are creating a massive amount of abundance and opportunity. And most of us, or no, actually, here's what I would challenge you to think about. In a world where you have much more power than ever before to make stuff happen that you care about, who do you want to be in that world? Because I'm not saying that you're necessarily going to get paid to do this. You might not be able to use this to make more money than the next guy or to have more status than the next guy, but you will have the power to make things happen that you care about much more effectively than ever before. And I think if you're in that world, if you're someone who still mostly cares about status and competing with other humans and somehow being better than others or trying to accumulate more stuff than others, you might not have a good time. But if you go, actually, that whole scramble to the top of the status pile wasn't really making me happy anyway, and maybe I can spend more time doing things that feel meaningful to me. If that resonates, then I think you're going to have an amazing time and things are only going to get better for a long time.
It's a very positive note on which to end this podcast.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
That's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I have been making some content about the topic of AI, and I sometimes find it a bit frustrating to try and pack everything down into catchy short YouTube videos. It's a skill I'm working on, but I do like really getting into it in longer form. And I hope you appreciate this format as well. Please let me know if you have any questions about this and if this is something you'd like to see and hear more of in the future. Go ahead and leave a comment below. It also really helps if you leave a like, leave a comment, just boost this in the algorithm a little bit and get it to more people. With that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.